It was horrific, yeah. She killed him with a hammer.
Sally Challen was jailed for life in 2010 for the murder of her husband Richard after hitting him repeatedly with a hammer. But for the next decade, her son David fought to have her conviction overturned, proving she had been a victim of domestic abuse her entire life. It saw his mother walk free, but it also changed the legal system and our understanding of coercive control. Now his new book, The Unthinkable, tells the extraordinary story of life behind the closed doors of one ordinary family home.
It's just one of those most surreal moments of my life. You know, a relative, cousin, barreling down the hallway, and she just has a message in her head and wants to get it out of hers and into mine, and grabs me by both shoulders and says, "Your dad's been found dead." I just couldn't wrestle with the idea that this quiet, meek woman, this pillar of my cornerstone of morality, had done this horrific act, which is the polar opposite, the most immoral. And I just, the weeks and months that came afterwards was trying to make sense of it, trying to find the words of what happened. And the only word was control. It was really through so many years of, even afterwards, trying to wrestle with that terminology. I never felt shame, never felt it. I refused to feel it. I believe society helped deliver this to us and to many families, as it still does throughout the country, by not proliferating this language of coerced control.
But explain how you got there, in a sense, because still now, I would say many people aren't quite sure exactly what coercive control is. But your mother was convicted of murder for killing your father. You then campaigned for years to get that to be overturned to manslaughter.
Yeah.
But what did you learn during that fight that made you understand we had all been coercively controlled in that house?
Well, immediately from after she was convicted of murder, we got the court files back, and I found that she told the forensic psychologists on both the defence and the murder that she had been sexually assaulted and raped as routine. And that wasn't used in the court case. And immediately the world just fell away. The idea of justice and truth, the idea that the truth shall set you free, is a fallacy, because the justice system refused to have protections or acknowledgements in society to this form of abuse. And then as I learned more over the years, the idea that she was controlled more in the home, that sexual violence was even more routine, and how he isolated her from friends and family, how he took her salary off her.
When you talk about coercive control, and it was a landmark case, and it has helped shape a better understanding of coercive control, but hasn't necessarily led to huge amounts of prosecutions, has it?
It hasn't kicked on. This is a decade since coercive control legislation has been in England and Wales, and we're failing miserably at it. I've seen police commissioners over the years say this is policing relationships. It's just a brass tacks failure on the front line in terms of emergency services to spot this violence or have the time to investigate it, because there's an easier pickup to say, if that person looks battered and bruised, open that door, as opposed to the hot air of a professional curiosity that I need to explore and give time to, understand the acts that escalated to that. I'm not going to bother, because it's a harder train to travel to get that conviction.
But you accept that it is a very complicated thing, don't you? It's far more complicated in a way, although convictions for domestic abuse are still lower than they should be. But
sure.
Are you sympathetic to the idea that it is a difficult thing to spot, it is a difficult thing to prove?
Yes, of course, it's immensely more difficult. This is why I'm telling my story, why the book is called The Unthinkable, because it has led to an unthinkable moment in my life. So I sit here every day that I have to share the fact that my mum killed my dad. That's the statement that I have to deliver to people in some shape or tone to inform them about my life, to inform them that they have an actionable ability as a CCTV camera in society to be aware to this. So it's about understanding and giving more time. Do we have the appetite to tackle male violence against women, tackle domestic abuse? If so, then we need to do more resources, more investigative time. Yes, it is harder. Domestic abuse is complex. That's what coerced control is. But the more people we can give the ability to share their stories and the confidence to do so, the more that we can understand the escalating acts that follow that lead to this. Everyone had a story in my family, from friends and family on both sides, about my father. And if they got into a room, it would have made a patchwork quilt of horrors that can help inform and get these charges turning into conviction. My mum spoke to friends, she spoke to family, she spoke to colleagues, employers, GP, therapists. Each one was a moment in time that could have stopped this escalation of acts that followed. And that's what we have today, and all the people in society have a role to play in this.
I mean, your father, like many of these men, they're hiding in plain sight a lot of the time, aren't they?
Yeah.
With coercive control. They don't look like abusers. They go into work, they're very smart, they're very personable, they're often very successful.
Giselle Pellicot has proliferated the idea that these men that commit these acts of violence are not monsters. I do not believe my father was born a monster. These people are created by society. They make their own choices. My father made his own choices. I'm not minimizing anything of how he came to do this. I believe it was a strategy that was developed. But this idea that they walk around like ogres, they hide behind closed doors and never come out, they come out and they're the nicest, most charismatic, charming person, like my father. Charismatic, charming.
There may be others out there, but you're a very rare, if not a lonely, male voice in this field, aren't you?
Yeah, I think so. I think men need to have empathy they have empathy. It's just the time to sit in these stories and listen, because we all have to be, watching out for each other. It's not policing the minutiae of people's actions, but the rabbit hole that may lead to and controlling their partner. We see it all the time with misogyny influences and where we're getting radicalized online, the sea of online hate. It's a reclaiming of traditional masculinity, because it's a pushback from Me Too and all the successes won from women from speaking out, the hard-fought successes. And what we are seeing is a reclaiming of traditional masculinity. And you're seeing even with politics, and the idea, Farage once said, that Andrew Tate has an important voice. And you have to look at these bad actors who are playing you. They're playing you in your man box. They want to get you back in the man box of control, to keep you silent, to keep you quiet, to not share your emotions. They say it's sharing your emotions is a feminization of masculinity. What? Speaking about emotions and actually giving the idea that you actually would be confronting male suicide, as well as talking about how you were raised in your home and how you might be affected by domestic abuse, but how you feel about how your father treated your mother. It's about talking and sharing and having empathy. And they want to detract that online. They want to put you in a box and they want to scam you and make money out of you.
But they can be, and they are, enormously popular with young men, which is surely very, very dangerous.
Because there's no space anymore. There's no physical space. Austerity has ripped bare our communities, and that it's laid waste to young men and boys who are trapped behind closed doors with their phones, getting picked up by the fishing trawler of misogyny influencers and getting thrown into closed Facebook groups.
Successive governments, the last couple and this one, have certainly said domestic abuse is much higher up their agenda. In a matter of weeks, we're expecting the violence against women and girls strategy from this new government. What needs to be in it?
It needs to be underpinned by a significant funding for the services who are doing the brunt of the work on the front line, specialist services and charities. Seen £20 billion go into defence spending. How much spending, are they going to say how much spending is going into tackling violence against women and girls? What's the number on it? Because we know domestic abuse and violence against women is $66 billion a year across the economy. Obviously, that's a way out of date stat. That's much higher. And we're not even seeing the children in these homes as well. 800,000 children. We all know it's millions more, and how underreported it is. The urgency. This is a normalisation of violence. 2 to 3 women a week. We know that number is higher. It's a normalisation of violence. If you put these women on a bus in the middle of central London, you blew it up, they'd have a COBRA meeting, they'd have urgency. But it's domestic terrorism behind closed doors, and they're acceptable deaths. It's shameful.
And I mean, you talk about children. You grew up in this atmosphere. Mm-hmm. We're not very good at understanding that children too are victims of this. What would you say about growing up in a household like this? I mean, your case, as you point out, is extreme, but growing up in a house where there is domestic violence or coercive control, what does it do to a child?
Yeah, going back and writing this book was a journey to unearth and find a child that I left behind who had happy memories, and I didn't want to disturb them. But going back and discovering my mother's past and giving voice to that, and seeing how that impacted me. Now, as a child, I was born with a pit in my stomach that I know now that my father was bad. And I knew it at the time, but I didn't have a reason why. I normalised every other violence that happened, the life of servitude that she had, that fear and control. And I was waiting for a moment, like an acorn that was blooming into more signs that I was being aware of what was going on in my home, the veil that fell. And what adult child survivors need to know is they have an ability of their own survivorship to claim it. And there's no weakness in that. There's strength and identity and community. And if we can share our stories, the more of these unthinkable acts, like in my book and what's happened in my family, don't happen to any other family.
What do you feel now about your father when you think about him?
My father exists at a place of love for a young child, a little David that is me, who in this book I've kind of repatriated as a part of my soul. He was a happily burgeoning child that became silent and quiet, and I didn't know the reason why. And it's not to say that his murder was justified. I've always said it's not, in almost every interview. It's an understanding to stop these events from happening. You know, he was my father. These were the choices he made. And this was the escalation of acts that followed. And this is the unthinkable, that moment that delivered me to talking about this until the end of time.
Any love for him? Is that possible?
Not as an adult. Not with what I knew and what I found out and what I explored in this book.